Hello and welcome to episode 12 of our Dirty Kim Basser podcast.
12.
I'm Ben.
I'm Tony.
He's here for now.
Mere in spirit.
In spirit. Right. Yeah, that's me.
Yeah, I see you shuffling papers.
Quick shuffling my
you
papers.
look like a very badly organised newsreader.
I've got a bit of confusion to clarify.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Because other day you mentioned we ended up in the impossible conversion, didn't we, of petrol, diesel. Diesel you mentioned. We're buying it in litres.
Yeah.
And measuring it in miles per gallon.
Yeah.
And giving price to Americans in pence.
Yeah.
So we're talking about a liquid that they don't use.
Yeah.
In a unit that they don't use.
They do use diesel, like
not like us though,
in
do they?
In the big Kenworths and the Max and the Peterbilts, they have diesel.
Yeah,
don't
but they V8 all the pickups, don't they? Instead of us putting
petrol.
pissy little 2 litre diesels in. So yeah, we ended up a liquid they don't use in a volume they don't use in a currency they don't use. They didn't know what we were talking
and
about.
our gallons are different to theirs too.
Yeah, which got me thinking about how ridiculous the whole system is. We don't measure things properly, do we? In Britain, we're stuck in limbo because we're not really metric. You know, how tall are you, Tony?
6 feet tall.
How big are your wheels on your car?
I haven't got a clue. Quite big.
You know, they'll be 15, 16 inch, won't they? You know what I mean?
I don't know.
How big's your TV?
I'll worry about that when I need tyres.
You know what I mean? I've got
My telly's not that big.
17 inch wheels, I got
30
60 inch TV, but then, and I get pints of milk delivered by milkman. But they also drop me half a litre of cream.
It's ridiculous.
So yeah, we're stuck in this ridiculous system. Even in pub,
Pints.
pint of beer. What do you get your shots of whiskey in?
Well, it used to be 1/6 of a gill,
Yeah,
and a gill, I believe, was a third of a pint. Is that right?
quarter, I think.
I thought it were a third. I might be wrong. Yeah, you might be right. Might have been a quarter pint. Anyway, but now it's 25 centilitres.
Millilitres.
No,
Centilitres are 250 millilitres, which is nearly half a pint.
no. It's 25 centilitres, isn't it? You get
No, centilitres, 10 millilitres.
fucking metric system.
We don't use centilitres in this country, but a lot of Europe do.
And yet our engines and American engines.
Coughing well today.
Yeah,
it's good for recording.
Yeah. Just clearing my throat. With the exception of Harley Davidson, my bike has an engine that's 103 cubic inches,
Yeah.
which equates to just shy of 1700 cc's. But mostly in American bikes as well. Probably because they're not made in America, but engines are in cc's, aren't they?
Mm.
Except when you get big, then they're in litres. They have a 5 litre V8. They don't have a gallon and a bit V8, do they?
They do still list them as it though.
Do they?
Because I used to have that Ford Econoline van,
Right.
E150, and that were a 5 litre. But when you bought it wasn't a Haynes manual, it were the other American ones. And it did say on the front in cubic inches.
Yeah.
So just to clarify this, right? Imperial pint,
Right, okay.
568.26125 millilitres.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
Close enough.
American liquid pint. Because not only do they not have our pint, they have a dry one and a liquid one.
How can you have a dry pint?
Folk knows. Right. American liquid pint. 473.17 millilitres.
Their pints are smaller than
About
ours.
3/4 of ours.
What do they have beers in?
Glasses.
Yeah, but I mean, they have beer in smaller glasses than us.
They must do.
I saw some American servicemen, and they were having beer in like plastic cups, which were tiny. Like,
We get American beer in Britain, Budweiser for example,
yeah.
in 330ml standard size cans.
Now,
it's nothing to do with pints.
For beer, it's a small measure, that, isn't it? Now, these lads, they were nice enough lads. They were American Marines. There were lots of hoo-haing going. And as they were drinking, to show how manly they were smashing the plastic cups against their bodies and heads, like so they'd neck this tiny little plastic cup
Thimble.
thing. And we're there drinking. I think we were drinking pints of Badger or something like that in proper pint glasses. looking at them thinking, what are these bloody idiots doing? And the thing that surprised me most of all these big lads, after 2 or 3 of these little beers, they were getting pretty smashed.
Maybe they were shots.
They weren't. No, they were just. It were what we'd call lager, but they called it a beer.
Right.
And to be fair, they were very hospitable. Once they cottoned on that we were servicemen too, we were invited to join in, and we sat there drinking their beer. We drank, the 2 of us drank considerably more of their beer than the 8 of them. And when we'd finished, we were in considerably better shape than them as well. They didn't handle it well at all. But we are a drinking culture in Britain, aren't we?
Yeah, we are.
We are. Yeah. So they have smaller pints than us.
Well, the smaller pint, 473 millilitres.
So when an American says to you, I've had bloody 11 pints, I can fight anybody. You can say,
7?
no, you've only had about 9 and a bit.
And then they've got dry pints, which is 550 millilitres.
So what's it like? Is that like a pound? A couple of pound? What's a dry pint?
A pound of what?
Why would you have a dry pint?
I don't understand what a dry pint is.
Mind you, we have fluid ounces.
We do.
Just to confuse matters further.
Our pint is 20 imperial fluid ounces.
That's right. That's a good system.
Is it?
It's not. Well, 1/20th in that. If you want to be really difficult, you'd have made it. There are 18.5 fluid ounces in a pint. If you really wanted to fuck a system up, wouldn't you?
That's like old money, isn't it?
Yeah.
A dozen pence in a shilling and then 20 shillings in a pound.
Yeah.
Whoa, what?
12 pence in a shilling, 20 shillings in a pound, and 21 shillings in a guinea if we're going into horse racing prizes.
So are we clear on American?
Clear as mud, Ben.
Good, right. Moving to other Australia, right. What's a schooner?
It's a
Because we've all heard of a schooner, haven't we?
It's a 2-masted ship with its sails arranged horizontally down the boat. So horizontally, like centrally, down like a central line along the boat, isn't it? Not to be confused with a sloop. Go on, what's a schooner in Australia?
Well, that depends where you are.
Right.
Big place.
Yeah.
Right.
They're alright though, aren't they? They're not so bad. They still put the Queen on the money.
Southern Australia, a schooner is 285 millilitres, which is roughly half a pint to us.
No then, is it?
But the rest of Australia,
Right.
a schooner is 450 millilitres.
So a bit more than half a
It's
pint.
somewhere near that American pint, that, isn't it? That American liquid pint is 473.
Yeah, so it's close.
It's close.
A schooner. They just made that up to be difficult.
So in Southern Australia, what everybody else is calling a schooner, they call a pint. And then our pint, they call an imperial pint.
I'm really impressed with you.
Right.
You've printed things out and everything.
It's not an imperial pint, though, because they round it off. Whereas it's 568 millilitres, they round it off to 570.
That's close enough for government work.
It is. The rest of Australia call that a pint, except Southern Australia call it an imperial pint. Now, what gets confusing is these half pints. In New South Wales and Western Australia, they call it a middy.
That sounds shit, doesn't it?
Victoria and Queensland, they call it a pot.
A pot.
A pot.
A pot.
In Tasmania, they call it a 10. But they don't call a pint a 20.
I wonder why they call it a 10.
Who knows?
But Tasmania was Dutch, wasn't it?
Maybe it translates back there somewhere.
Yeah, it could have come from a different system.
And Northern Territory,
That's
a handle.
To be fair, if I were going to live anywhere in Australia, Northern Territory would be where I went for.
Where nobody is.
Nice bit of sunshine. And
It's not a bit of sunshine though, is it? It's proper
people.
hot.
I could live with it. I'd some kind of hat then for
To cover your ginger.
a ranger.
It's not going to
like
save
me.
you.
Yeah, but very like a Mexican
sombrero,
sombrero
yeah.
that casts a bigger shadow than I do. That's how it works, isn't it?
When I were in Thailand, there were a lot of muzzies, and I got an Australian style, like proper with string and corks.
They work.
They work, but nobody in Thailand's got one. So everybody looks at you. And our lass's dad were looking at me going, "You look a right twat."
You didn't care. Have you ever had infected mosquito bites?
I've had an allergic reaction to
I've
mosquito
had that
bites.
too. Yeah, and I'm telling you now, it doesn't matter what you look like. Go to whatever lengths you can to avoid it.
I had about a week before we left Thailand, I got this allergic reaction to mozzie bites, where every joint in your body ached and got stiff and seized up, and it was horrific. And I didn't want to go to the doctors there, because I thought, we're leaving in a week, it might ease off. And I went back here, and my GP said, oh yeah, I see 2 or 3 people a year with this allergic reaction to mozzie bites.
I got bitten by a spider in Cyprus, a poisonous spider.
Right.
Obviously didn't kill me or anything, but it wasn't pleasant. It's called a Brown's spider, I think, and they're quite common around that eastern Mediterranean area. And it made me feel, bit me on my finger, because obviously I put my hand down and that's when I must have disturbed it, and
Right, yeah.
bit me on my little finger. I had 2 right little puncture marks, and I felt very, very nauseous, and my hand was swollen up like a football. And luckily, you know, I recovered from it fairly quickly. I didn't need any treatment or anything like that, but it was a little bit unpleasant. And it's things like that, and you're talking about your mosquitoes in Thailand and things like that, made me realise how lucky we are to live in Britain, where there's not a right lot can hurt us, is there? You know, like
A wasp's about as bad as it gets.
yeah,
really,
well,
isn't it?
there's not much worse than a wasp in England. I mean, even our snakes, that we've got the adder, that's poisonous.
Mm-hmm.
But when was the last time you saw an adder? They hide away and they keep themselves. I think I've seen one in my life.
I've never seen one.
We've got grass snakes. When was the last time you saw one of them?
Never seen one.
You don't see them around here, do you?
Slow worm, never seen
Slow
one.
worm. Well, that's actually a lizard, isn't it?
yeah.
Again, but it's also harmless.
Yeah.
What have we got here? There's like, we've got nettles and wasps, and that's it.
Nettles are a non-event, aren't
Yeah,
they?
nettles and wasps. You know, that's the most dangerous wildlife we've got. We don't really have poison ivy and poison oak and stuff like that, do we? You know,
You've just reminded me of a nettle story.
God, yeah.
Oh, and it were kids being nasty, cruel bastards as kids can be, you know.
What, did they put them down your underpants, Ben?
I was neither the instigator nor the victim here, but I witnessed
Right.
it.
They put them down my underpants.
And
but
I heard him
it's all right
scream.
because I liked it.
We were down by Beck at West Vale there, under the bridge.
Yeah.
And nettles grow really big, and we were pissing about in water. And somebody that I know pushed somebody else that I know into these nettles that were a good 5 foot high.
Oh,
And he had shorts on.
yeah.
Shorts and nothing else.
Oh,
Just shorts. He were
That's
bare.
cruel. It's a mean thing
They were
to do.
nasty.
Isn't it? A mean thing to do, yeah.
And he screamed, you know, as you can imagine, because he must have had 1,000 stings. Yeah, and I witnessed that, and I thought, that were a bit cruel, you nasty bastard. You know?
Have you noticed though? I mean, the nettle, as we know it, I imagine is an old plant. Now, by that, I mean, as a species, it's been around a long time,
Yeah.
right? I would imagine it certainly predates human beings.
Probably,
In,
yeah.
in the form we know it now. It's got its sting, presumably, to protect itself from damage. You know, it's not going to get trampled and things.
Slugs aren't going to go on it, are they?
That kind of thing, yeah. But then have you noticed how the stings really bother us human beings? We're so soft, aren't we? But when I were a kid, we used to have this little dog. It were a male dog, and it used to cock its leg and piss on stuff. And it'd go up to a big patch of nettles, cock its leg, expose his bollocks, rub 'em all over the nettles, never flinch.
I don't think it gets through the fur.
Even on the little bollocks.
I don't think it gets through the fur.
I
Can't
don't
do
know,
it.
it mustn't do, but it don't bother animals, does it? They don't bother them at all.
But if it got its lipstick out while it were pissing and it went on its lipstick, it'd know.
It might have been like me. He might have liked it. You know,
You're back to Mrs. Whippy now.
yeah, I know. It became a bit. We were a weird family. It became a bit of a tradition in our house with this dog, and sometimes the dog would get a bit randy, and he had this like blanket that it used to sleep with, and it'd start shagging the blanket, but you could see it was struggling. And one day, my dad must have like felt sorry for it, like because he this blanket obviously was floppy, it wouldn't stay put while dog would try to shag it, and it was like on bloody ground wriggling. And my dad held blanket up and let dog have a go, you know. And that became a sort of thing sometimes. Dog would bring you a blanket while you're watching telly, and you'd hold blanket while he shagged it.
What?
I know it's just what we did, you know. Like, so I was there, you know, 10, 11-year-old holding this blanket up for this dog, you know. Oh, hello, Vicar. You know.
I don't know what's more daft, doing it or admitting to
I
it.
don't know. Well, there we go. So, yeah, but to be fair, I mean, yeah, it's just.
I'll tell you how a weird dog.
That's how I grew up.
I'll tell you how a weird dog. Chappers.
Did I?
When we were about 14.
You named him Whappers.
Chappers, that's anonymous.
Yeah, that.
Unless you know him. Buddha. He had a little dog called Midge. It was some kind of tiny terrier. It was smaller than your pathetic thing, so it was small.
It must have been tiny then.
Yeah. When you were sat watching TV, it'd come and nestle its back legs either side of your foot. It were female. And it'd rub itself against your foot, like getting off.
Would it?
It were minging. You just flick it away with your foot, you know.
Nah.
Yeah, minging dog.
Should have just let it. Wouldn't have done you any harm. So back to news. Okay.
Grim news.
Grim and bizarre, dark news.
Get comfortable.
Get yourself comfortable.
Comfortable. Go on then. Grim, bizarre, dark.
Police constable. We're in Britain now. And this is very recent, 19th of May.
That is recent.
Yeah. Police constable facing sack after telling police community support officer he stirred her tea with his penis.
Ow.
Yeah.
Ow.
That is my first thing.
Is this an iced tea?
Lukewarm tea? Maybe you just told her.
I generally wait till mine's cooled down before I stir it with my penis.
Yeah, that would be wise.
Yeah.
Shall I continue?
Go for it. Go on.
They name him, and I'm going to name him. PC Stephen Green was described as having a cocky attitude and acting like
Cocky attitude.
all over the place.
Ba-bum.
Right. So, cop facing sack after saying he stirred colleagues' tea with his genitals. A police officer could lose his job today after he told a female PCSO he stirred her tea with his penis. He claimed he was having a bit of a laugh and that he had misjudged his friendship with the victim. But he has been found guilty on 9 charges in front of a disciplinary panel. Between May and July 2020, he made sexual comments towards the woman, identified only as PCSOA. Gets more confusing when you add more letters.
More acronyms, yeah,
No.
that helps.
And licked his lips while gyrating his hips in the canteen. He sounds like a right classy individual, this fella, doesn't he?
I'm thinking like Stifler. You know, American Pie.
Oh, right.
Guy
yeah.
that just blurts shit out and just does random shit. Yeah, sounds a bit that way,
I
doesn't
don't
it?
recall, but yeah. Well, PC Green watched her changing in the female locker room and had given her a shoulder massage without her permission. Oh, so he's a touchy-feely type. Not allowed to be touchy-feely in
No,
this.
you're not,
Not
are
in the workplace now.
No.
I'll tell you the minute you touch me, Ben, I'll be telling everybody. A second PCSO described him as having a cocky attitude and behaving as though he owned the place. Another witness said PC Green told the female officer, "I'm a PC, you're a PCSO. If I say bend over a table, you just do it." Police service isn't what it once was.
It's changed, did it?
Yeah. They should stick to beating confessions out to criminals.
Bit of 70s police.
Yeah. On another occasion, PC Green had taken a picture of the junior officer from her Instagram account and had it printed on a cup for her as a gift which read, "Brilliant but not perfect." It's a bit stalkery, this, isn't it? A bit of a creepy individual. The gift was returned with a note that said, "Thank you, but no thank you." PCSO-A said, "I would have liked to use the mug as a gateway to tell him to back off, but I wasn't given that chance. I feel it could have been resolved." When asked to clarify the incident in the local police station, another witness, PCSO-B, said, "The door wasn't knocked, it was forcefully opened, and I heard PC Green say, "Are you decent?" This must be when he gave her the inappropriate massage.
Right, yeah.
So, we've got a pervy policeman who is going around stirring people's tea with his...
Don't say any more about his tea.
We've got some more.
Oh, go on.
Arwell Jones, who chaired the panel at Sussex Police, said, "This is not how anybody should be made to feel when they come to work. We'd considered the breach as gross misconduct." PC Green denies most of the charges, but admits that he did push the door to the locker room. He says he was trying to make friends with PCSOA. I bet he bloody was. Yeah. As he was not friendly with his own PCSO, who often made fun of him.
So he's henpecked by his
other
one that he can't henpeck.
Yeah, maybe that's what it is. I don't know. The outcome will be decided later this week. Right. So, but it doesn't say more about the tea stir. It was the headline that grabbed me. The stirring the tea with the penis. The end of my penis is quite sensitive to
90-degree water. Yeah,
I mean, and I like a cup of tea. Coffee doesn't have to boil.
No,
but tea, the water should still be boiling when you put it on the tea.
Yeah.
For that infusion. So I wouldn't want to put my dick in there.
This is why people that put milk in tea first should be shot.
Yeah, because it makes a shitty cup of tea.
Yeah.
So is he one of these people? So not only did he stir his dick with stir the tea with his dick, he made her a shit cup of tea.
It's disgraceful.
What a fucking savage.
Anybody that's putting milk in tea first deserves everything they get.
I'm going to put this out there as well. The guy's an arsehole, right? A bit of a bully.
Weird guy.
But police aren't what they were, are they?
True.
No, and now maybe it's an age thing, but there were a time where you looked at a copper and you thought, "Fucking hell, you won't want to feel one off him. You know, you want to get a thump off him." Now, and maybe it's just because I'm older, I look at him and thinking, bloody hell, if that lad wanted to arrest me, he'd have to ring his fucking mates. You know, it's like...
More meat in your jock box.
Jesus Christ, you used to have to be told to be a copper. Fucking, you know, where did he find him? Yeah, I think like many other things is it's not what it was, is it? You know.
No.
I saw some policemen. They were Essex police, and I didn't get involved because it was none of my business. But I was at this pub in a little village called Thaxted, and the pub was called the Plough. Gustav Holst, the composer, you know, the Planet Suite. Yeah. Gustav Holst had been the organist and choir master in the church there at one point.
Right.
And that was that little village's claim to fame.
Yeah.
You know, and that's about as exciting as things got in Thaxted. So I'm at this lovely little country pub called the Plough. And I can't remember what I was even doing in that part of the country, you know, but I was down there. And this old bloke, the landlord had decided he'd had enough to drink, so he said he wouldn't serve him anymore. So old bloke grumbled a bit and went back out, and came back about 25 minutes later with a golf club out of the back of his Jag, and started threatening to smash everybody's head in. You know, now the place was full of other elderly, nice country gent type people, you know, and they were all a little bit frightened of this. He came over to me and my mate and gestured with this club. We growled at him and he quickly scurried away to find an easier target. You know, there was no real threat in him. The landlord was terrified. This was drama the likes of this little village doesn't see very often, and they called the police. Well, this was drama that the local police don't see very often either. 3 vans turned up, and it took them 45 minutes to persuade him to put that golf club down and get in the van. You know, it was a shambles. I could have picked the fella up and it'd have been a lot, you know.
Why did you not assist?
Because again, it's one of those things, isn't it? I'd have ended up being locked up, wouldn't I? Because that's the way the police work in this country.
True.
You know, they're not. The whole system in this country is geared to protect the wrong uns. Not if you're a working man who pays his taxes, who runs around in a car that's taxed and insured, you know, they're gonna bloody have you You know, if you're a wrong 'un who's been in and out of prison all his life, you know, what can they do? They can't touch you. You know, that's sadly that's law and order in this country now, and that's why folk have no time for police. You know, and
does this employing 6 stone coppers come from some kind of non-discriminatory thing?
Well, I believe it does. I mean, I'm not certain, but I think they've done away with height requirement for the guards now as well. You know, Coldstream Grenadiers.
Right.
I think because they used to have to be. I think you used to have to be 6 foot to be a guardsman. Or it might have been 5'11" or something like that.
Right.
You know, but I think they've done away because it is discriminatory, apparently. But you don't want short guardsmen.
That said, when I'm going back to when we were 18, 19, and we used to go at Coliseum and shit like that, they reckon the smallest bouncer there was the hardest lad.
He probably was.
You
He'd
know,
probably have to be.
He apparently was very, very handy.
I did a bit of bouncing, and I were a big lad when I were in bouncing. I had more meat on me than I do now, but I wasn't massive like some of them were. I want like a lot of the lads were bodybuilders and stuff, and I wasn't. But a lot of the lads were absolute posers as well.
Yeah.
You know, they were gym queens.
Yeah.
And I do remember, like, I used to ask people to leave, and they'd say, like, you know, well, the other guys say, "Come on, you're going," and they look at these massive guys. "All right, okay," and they're off. I used to say, "Come on, you're going," and they'd be like, "Oh, I was gonna fucking make me." So the difference is, I'd have to get heavy-handed with them.
Yeah.
You know, just to make them listen.
Yeah.
And then
I've done that to a bounce.
I do remember there was one situation where some lads were kicking off outside, and I think it's the only time in my life I've been referred to as the little one. You know, because I'm not little, but I was little compared to my colleagues.
Meatheads.
Yeah, and to me, I'm a bloke slightly above average height. You know,
yeah,
it's not a thing, but it were all kicking off. They'd refused entry to these group of lads who were all about to start fighting, and I stuck my head around the corner. I said, "Right, what's going on?" And it were, "Come on, you got to go. You got to watch that little one. Come on, let's go." It's because they'd probably seen me open a fire door with somebody's head or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, but it were a rough bloody club I used to work on. You know, I think the year 2000, the millennium, was the last shift I did.
Doing it before that.
Yeah, that's when I stopped doing it. And back then it were a meat edge job. You know, there were none of this. You weren't I'm a door supervisor, professionalism, first aid trained. You know, I'm there to look after you to make sure you all have a safe night, kind of shit.
Yeah, I'm there to pull you out by your ears.
I were employed. I used to start at 10 and fight till 2. That were my job. I was a bouncer. We were paid in cash. You know, we weren't on the books. We weren't. You know, it wasn't. You know, the world has changed, hasn't it?
Yeah.
You know.
I think my last shift on when I did it were 97, 98 New Year.
Yeah, New Year's used to be awful, didn't they? People coming up to you trying to cuddle you, like, fuck off.
Yeah.
Or was that just me?
But I did.
I used to have earplugs in, mate.
Did you?
Yeah. I used to hate them. You know that dancey music?
Yeah.
I used to hate it. I used to be in clubs, stood by some speakers, people talking to me. I couldn't hear a word. I had earplugs in. I hated it. You know, just.
And I'd have been about 18, do you remember Tram Shed?
Yeah.
And it were like moshers out front, wasn't it? And then out through back bit, it went through to a other way around.
Zubar were at back, wasn't it? Zubar were at back.
Was that moshy bit? That?
Yeah, you used to go into gents and there'd be 11 smashed urinals. You know, they were just, and so everyone was just pissing on some stone goth on floor. You know, it were awful, wasn't it? It were fucking awful.
Now, so yeah, that were it. Goth bit were out back with all moshing going on, and then front bit was a kind of ravey bit, wasn't it? You know.
It were. Used to go through a weird tunnel to get between two.
That's
didn't
it.
you?
Yeah,
it were weird.
It were an odd place. Now I were out front, and I was drinking with a mate of mine. Now I think we were only 2 people drinking out front bit because everybody were on one drug or another.
Yeah. That's what the kind of place we're like, wasn't it?
And so
early 90s.
Yeah.
And
I suppose this would have been about 95, I guess,
yeah,
or about
maybe,
18.
Yeah.
And me and my mate were only two drinking where everybody were getting high, you know. And they didn't like that because they thought, oh, you're going to kick off.
Yeah.
And we were just, you know,
Just having a pint.
Yeah, I stood and I've 3/4 of a pint in my hand, admiring view, you know. And this little bouncer comes up to me, weighs about as much as my beer in my hand, you know, and he says, "You've got to leave." Oh, why? And he says, "My boss says you've got to leave." I said, "All right, well, I've 3/4 of a pint here, so I'll be drinking that." And he stood there a while. I took a little sip, and you know, I went down in it. Not for him. And I finished my pint. I went back to the bar and bought another one. I carried on drinking, and then he came back again. "I fucking told you." I said, "Yeah, I heard you." And he went away and came back with 4 others then, you know. I thought, okay, I know when I'm outmatched. So, swing down other half that I had, and we left. I'm not getting involved here.
I had a very different approach. I think I had quite a nice approach to bouncing. You know, I never thumped anybody who wanted a dickhead.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to have occasional argument with club management because he'd be saying, "Tony, we've got a dress policy here. What if you let them 3 fellas in for?" And I'd say things like that. Them 3 fellas, they're on a works night out. They're nice lads. They're going to come in. They're probably going to drink 10 pints each, and they're going to go home, and you're not going to have a bit of trouble out of them, right? As that arsehole in Armani suit, he's already downed a bottle of vodka before he's got here.
Yeah.
You know, so you're not going to make any more money out of him. You know, he's taking his drugs. He's one that's going to be being weird and a problem at end at night. You know, but you want him in. You don't want these lads in. You know, it was silly, really. You know, just how it were. But I mean, I were one that'd say, "Look, lad, you're not supposed to come in your trainers. Keep out of sight, and you know you'll be all right."
Yeah.
But you know, I wouldn't send them home to get changed. You know, like some lads did. You know.
Tell you what though, I don't miss it. I don't miss the drinking it was, and I don't miss the bouncing.
I don't miss nightclubs. I don't miss the atmosphere. I went out for a pint. I was telling you, wasn't I? My brother booked a table because that's what you've got to do at the moment because of current weird situation. So he booked a table. There were 6 of us at this table, and I'm going to say I didn't enjoy the evening. I didn't like the restrictive feelings on my movement. I didn't like the atmosphere.
Restrictive? How have you got to stay sat at your table?
Stay sat at your table. If you go to the toilet, you've got to put a mask on, and therein lies the problem. Now, this pub I went to, Ellen Craft and Tap, it's a smashing place. Lovely people that run it. It's the tap for the local brewery.
Yeah.
Ellen Brewery. And they're great. And, you know, you won't hear me slating them. They're doing their best under difficult circumstances. Because they are, let's face it, businesses have taken an hammering out there, you know, and they're doing their best. They can't even work to capacity. They're trying. I mean, we spent 120 quid on our table, you know, with beer we supped.
Yeah.
So, you know, we're doing his bit for local economy too. But I just didn't enjoy it, and there were an incident that soured the night for me. And it's that thing where everybody's got a camera now.
Yeah.
As soon as something happens, someone's got a camera out.
Yeah.
And what happened was there's only 2 toilets because it's a micro pub, so they've got a ladies and a gents.
Yeah.
But they don't need to be ladies and gents because they're both identical, and they're both separate, lockable.
Yeah.
So I waited outside the gents when I needed a wee with my mask on, and this guy in there was taking ages. I was busting for a piece, so I thought, you know what, ladies is empty. I'm going to be 2 minutes. I nipped into the ladies. It's locked, you know.
Yeah.
Didn't expose myself to anybody, you know. I did what I was doing, washed my hands, put my mask back on, came back out. There's a lad with a bloody camera phone. "Are you a lady?" Putting it, like, filming me. Right? Which I thought, come on, I just had a piss, mate. You know, so I took his phone off him.
Good.
And I put it in his pint. And then I removed my mask and I pushed him into the corner at the pub and had a quiet word about how I didn't appreciate being filmed and perhaps he should mind his own fucking business. As I turned around, there's an old couple, fucking pair of busybodies, grassing me up to staff for removing my mask. So I had to tell them to fuck off and mind their own business as well. And I think the staff kind of got the impression, do you know what, this might be a battle we don't want, and they left me alone. And I went back to the table and I caused no bother, but it soured the evening for me. That first of all, that I've got a camera, then that telltale school kiddie.
Snidey, yeah.
These were people in the 60s.
Yeah.
Sure, if you're in your 60s, and you listen to our podcast and you've not learned to mind your own fucking business, by now there's something wrong. It just ruined my night. I mean, it don't help that my little brother is he gets gobby when he's had an half. That's an imperial half, not one of your weird Australian halves.
What's it called? Hang on, wait for it.
A 10.
He's had a midi pot schooner 10 or handle.
Yeah, and
right.
He gets obnoxious.
Yeah.
Which makes it hard work anyway. He were actually telling me off most of the evening.
For what?
Well, a lot of it was my nephew Barney's first legal pint in a pub. He turned 18 while all the pubs were shut, and we took him along with us. And I think Richard's trying to shelter him from colourful things I've done in the past. I
thought you were squeaky clean.
I am squeaky clean, but I was always like working on the door of nightclubs, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Richard sees it. He's a bit of
Is he a prude? Is it?
Not really. No, I wouldn't say that, but he sometimes gets some funny ideas. Just in his head, like, and especially when he's had a beer, he was just like, he were wittering. He was starting to have a witter.
Right.
You know what I mean? He were just.
Was he a bit of an old woman?
Yeah.
Right.
There's a lot of more than we are, to be honest. That's the thing. And I'll be honest, I didn't enjoy the evening to it. It were, yeah.
Does he listen?
I don't think so. I think he thinks it's another of my idiotic things I do. He's very judgmental. Is our Richard?
Unlike us.
Yeah. So yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, so there we go. Yeah, but yeah, bouncing. So yeah, you used to go to tram shed. It were awful, wasn't it?
It were horrific.
It were awful. To be fair though, Halifax is awful for a night out.
It were famous though, wasn't it? People came from miles
around. There were more
back then.
pubs at one time in Halifax per square mile than anywhere else in the world or something. It were. But it when I look back, I mean, I used to enjoy it, but when I look back now, I think, why? The amount of money I wasted.
Mm.
If I'd have not gone out and just put that money away, I'd have been loaded now. But hindsight's a wonderful thing. I think you felt like you were missing out as well, didn't you? If you
were
didn't
missing
go out.
nothing. It was shite.
Yeah,
it was shite.
It was the same shite every week.
Yeah.
Same dickheads fighting for a taxi.
Yeah. A mate of mine walked home because he didn't have any money left for a taxi and got mugged on the way home and nicked his trainers.
Better than that guy that had to walk home after shitting himself.
Mm.
What you got?
Your mate Jeff,
yeah.
Between Jeff and Dave, they're keeping this podcast going, aren't
Good.
they?
What's Jeff got to say then? Has he emailed in?
He's emailed in quite a bit, actually.
Oh.
And I haven't pre-read it, so if this turns out to be a load of shit, we'll cut it out.
All right, it won't be. If it's Jeff,
he was quite eloquent on his other email.
He's a
I've yet to meet Jeff.
way with words. I'm sure you'll meet him soon.
Yeah.
Maybe when pubs settle down a bit.
Let's see what he's got. Hi, chaps. Thanks for the podcasts. I'm continuing to enjoy them. There must be something wrong with me.
That's nice feedback.
Speaking of feedback, your friend said that it helped her mental health.
Yeah,
Just having a bit of a laugh.
She did, didn't she?
That were lovely.
Well,
we won't name her and
I
keep
think
her quiet, but
the whole lockdown thing has affected different people in different ways. Now, perhaps perversely, I've thrived on it. I'm actually. I wish we could stay locked down forever. I don't like people, but other people have struggled a bit, felt a bit lonely, a bit isolated, and things. And I think she was sort of saying that listening to our podcast was a good thing, perked her up a bit.
Yeah, good.
And I suppose if you've got it on in the background, it's like you're listening to two friends, maybe.
There were one of the lads, several actually mentioned it were a bit like listening to somebody in a pub.
Yeah.
Maybe that you were sat on next table because you weren't talking, but you were listening to some people on next
people
table.
talking shite on a table
Shite,
in the toilet room, yeah. Well, that's what we do, mate.
That's it. Anyway,
Talk
Jeff,
a lot of shite.
back to Jeff. You mentioned supermarket trolleys in your last one, which reminded me of a story. Unfortunately, the trolley story reminded me of another. And another. Everything in these stories really genuinely happened. Many years ago, when the world was far younger and I used to work for Morrison's Supermarkets, the branch I worked at was next to the Rochdale Canal in Failsworth, Manchester. Back then, the canal was in a poor state, filled with all kinds of silt and the debris of nearly 100 years, including, I might add, my Action Man deep sea diver. That was the one with a proper diver's helmet and lead boots.
I know the one. It had a rubber suit, didn't it?
He's probably
you used
still...
to have to get talcum powder onto the suit to get the suit
it
on
and
it.
off.
Yeah. It's like, they call it a dry suit, don't they? Yeah. Kind of thing.
He's probably still lying at the bottom of the canal with a piece of broken string still tied to the back of his diving gear.
Oh, no.
And I remember that. Canals were rough, weren't they?
Oh, shit.
You know, they've been cleaned up a lot.
Full of
lately.
diesel, shit, bodies, especially Manchester. Guns, discarded guns.
Recently I saw a picture of somebody that had been magnet fishing
Oh, yeah.
in a
Pull out all
canal
sorts out, don't they?
somewhere near London. And they pulled out guns and knives pretty much solely that. It was a lot.
Yeah.
A lot. Yeah. Right, carry on. The warehouse manager at the supermarket was called Albert, and a few words about him might help. Albert often supervised night shifts. This was before 24-hour opening. It was just a bunch of lads stocking the shelves while the place was closed. Albert was from Newcastle upon Tyne and had a thick Geordie accent. He'd worked as a ship's engineer before getting into the supermarket trade. One night, Albert pulled a stunt that went down in local legend. He offered to nip to the chippy for the lads on the night shift and got a list together of whatever everybody wanted. With the list in one hand and the money in the other, he stood there and complained that he wouldn't be able to carry it all back. Somebody suggested he take his car, but Albert wasn't keen on using his own vehicle for the journey, so he found a perfect solution by deciding to drive the warehouse forklift to the chippy, along the A62, main Manchester to Oldham Road.
Alright.
The stacker was speed limited to something like 5 miles an hour, so it took a while for him to get back with the chips. A couple of days later, there was a story in a Manchester Evening News about police receiving reports of a stacker truck doing about 4 miles an hour up a dual carriageway with a pallet on the front with several parcels of fish and chips on it. But of course we knew nothing about that.
Fair enough.
Today's fish and chip prices, that would be about 12 grand, wouldn't it, to fill a forklift?
Yeah. Wow.
I also remember turning up quarter of an hour late for a night shift because I'd lost track of time in the pub and walking into the store where I found Albert waiting for me and looking at his watch disapprovingly. I promptly apologised for being late and said I hoped Albert would accept a small token in return for not docking my pay, at which point I revealed the pint of bitter I'd been hiding behind my back and give it to him. My pay was not docked that night. Albert loved machinery, and the baler in the warehouse was one of his pets. It was a large machine, taller than a man and just as wide. We'd throw all the cardboard waste packaging into the machine and it would compress it down into solid cardboard bales for disposal. It was a temperamental machine and often needed repairing, at which point we'd see Albert striding purposefully down the warehouse, with a smile on his face and his toolbox in his hand. One day a baler broke down. When Albert arrived at the machine, he was dismayed to find that an access panel had been removed, that somebody was inside the machine from the waist up and the sound of the tools showing that they were trying to repair it. "What the fuck do you think you're up to?" shouted Albert. "Nobody's authorised to touch that machine except me." "Steady on, Albert," came a voice from within the baler. "I think I'm allowed to touch it, since I own it." Albert hadn't realised that Ken Morrison, who owned the company at the time, was visiting the store. This takes me on to the reason for writing. Took a while, didn't it? Does he talk this much in pub?
He talks like he writes.
Oh, does he?
But yeah,
Yeah, I met a guy when we had a butty van down by Brookfoot, and he was having his barge repaired at a guy
oh
there.
yeah,
And he used to come out to our butty van. He helped Quan set up, and we'd give him his breakfast for free. And he was a Londoner, when Londoners were Londoners, you know,
yeah.
from London. And he also had a book published. And I said, "Oh, I'll get that one, have a read," you know. And I got it, and he signed it for us.
Yeah.
And I read it. And when I read it,
He talked.
I went back to him and I said, "That's exactly how you speak."
Yeah,
You
how
know, I
you
said,
write.
"You've written it exactly how you speak." Yeah, and he didn't realise that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, right, back to Jeff.
Back to Jeff. Yeah.
God, Jeff, we're running out of tape here. Hurry up. The store was next to the canal, and it was inevitable that the local scroats and the ne'er-do-wells would make a habit of throwing our shopping trolleys into its murky depths. Albert's favourite punishment for staff mistakes and general stupidity was to send a culprit out to the canal with a grappling hook, tied to a length of rope, and have them fish trolleys out of the cut. If caught and sentenced to this punishment, Albert would hand you the rope and hook and give you a number. The number was the number of trolleys you had to retrieve. I only fell foul of this once and got off lightly. I admit that I was dicking about while driving the stacker truck and managed to knock over a pile of cases in the warehouse. Luckily it was nothing breakable, so I was given a grappling hook and rope, told 1, and sent out into the July sunshine to retrieve 1 trolley from the Rochdale Canal. I managed the task without too much trouble, as everybody did, until one fateful day. It was that period just after Christmas, and the warehouse staff were a bit giddy with relief after getting the festive rush out the way. A member of staff called Lee Knight needed Albert to sign for something at the back door, and got on the store PA to call him there. "Could Albert come to the back door, please?" Albert to the back door. It wouldn't have been an issue, except that the store was open, fully staffed, and that Lee put out a call in the most appalling bad Geordie accent you've ever heard. Albert didn't like people taking the piss out of his accent. When he arrived at the back door, most of the warehouse staff had arranged to be somewhere nearby. Albert walked up to Lee, just looked at him sadly and shook his head, picked up the rope and hook, handed it to Lee and said, 5. As Lee took the grapple and headed to the back door in the canal, Albert looked past him at the snow-covered frozen loading bay and thick sheet of ice covering the canal beyond. "Lee!" shouted Albert. "Make it just 1. Albert walked back down to the warehouse while the rest of us watched Lee trudge across the loading bay, pick up a brick and throw it at the ice covering the canal in an attempt to break it. We watched him make a couple more attempts at breaking the ice, and then got back to our own jobs. It was a good 10 minutes later when Albert returned and asked where Lee was. We all looked out the back door and Lee was nowhere to be seen. Things could have been a lot worse if we hadn't heard a pitiful cry for help at that point. We rushed over to the canal where we found a decidedly blue Lee bobbing up and down in a hole in the ice in the canal, unable to climb out. It turns out that Lee managed to break the ice and had tossed the grappling hook into the water. He'd been lucky enough to snag a trolley on the first throw, but then found out that it was pretty well stuck in the sludge at the bottom. After a couple of half-hearted tugs on a rope, Lee had decided to throw everything into it so that he could get the job done and get back into the warm. Unfortunately, Lee had been standing on sheet ice, so that when he launched his massive pull, the trolley had stayed put, and Lee slid across the icy ground straight into the cut. We put Lee in the warehouse office with the heater going full blast, and kept bringing him cups of cocoa until he turned back to normal colour. We all laughed and joked about it, including Lee, but it's never left my mind how close he came to actually dying that day. That's why you should always return your shopping trolley to the correct place. Cheers, Jeff. So he survived.
He did.
Now, funny that I should mention Guy with canal boat, because he's a bit of a Captain Calamity. You remember that guy that used to rescue at sea all the time? He was always on news. They must have rescued him a dozen times.
Jim Branson. Oh, that was hot air balloon, wasn't it?
Yeah. But yeah, my mate had a few do's with his canal boat.
I've been rescued, from sea.
He fell off in a lock.
Has he?
Yeah. And they're quite turbulent, the locks. But it was.
Oh, I imagine so, yeah.
And it wasn't a warm day.
No, well, in Britain, to be fair, even in summer,
it's cold.
You're looking at hypothermia sometimes if you go in water, aren't you?
And he described it to me, and he'd said, and he wasn't a young man when he did it. He was sort of mid-60s.
Yeah.
And he said he was scared and somebody had thrown him a rope. There was no lifebuoy available, and somebody threw a rope, and he tied it, he twizzled it around his arm, and wrapped it around and around because he knew that he couldn't hold on to it.
Right.
Yeah, so it were a close one.
Yeah.
Not good.
Yeah, dangerous stuff. Another email we've had from a listener, Alan, another military man.
Right.
Alan, in the 60s, served in the Royal Corps of Transport, as it was then. It's the Royal Logistics Corps now, but in those days it was the Royal Corps of Transport. And he was a driver. And as a young soldier, he was sent on a course. I think it was, I can't remember what it might have been some kind of like Storeman's course and things like this, which, but every squadron. So he was sent to, I think he said Deep Cut Barracks to go on this course. He met his nemesis there. Squadron Sergeant Major Smythe, who was a little fella, probably about 5 foot tall, with a very thin moustache and a whining, nasal, squeaky voice. And it's little man syndrome. Yeah. Sergeant Major Smythe immediately took a dislike to Alan, because Alan was a really big lad.
Right.
Built like a Shire horse, Alan. He's still a big lad now, although he's quite elderly now, but there we go. So, this bloke determined to make him miserable. If there was a shit job, Alan got it. If somebody was going to get shouted at, Alan got it. Alan was the one who had to wait around. Alan was the one who had to push a brush around afterwards. Whenever anything was going wrong, Alan would get the blame. The Sergeant Major's wrath, And in the army, a Sergeant Major has a lot of power over someone.
Yeah.
Alan found himself on guard in an evening and stuff when the other lads were allowed to go to the naffy for a pint and things like this, and he just generally had it in for him. And what Alan's emailed in with is a confession.
Confessions are generally good.
So,
go on.
He's been singled out for another shit job. Mm-hmm. They're loading wagons. He's got to load these wagons, and these wagons contained hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of yogurts on pallets, all banded up. And he had to load them onto these wagons and prepare them all for dispatch to wherever they were all going. And the Sergeant Major, Smythe, came along and inspected his work and checked everything off on the manifest. He got into the back of one of these wagons, and Alan saw his opportunity. This particular wagon was bound for Edinburgh. So he pushed him in and quickly sealed up the back doors of the refrigerated wagon. Yeah. Went round the front, banged the driver and said, "There's your manifest, mate, you're good to go." He got away with it. He never got done. Everyone was wondering where the Sergeant Major was, and he just denied all knowledge, and I've not seen him.
And this sergeant didn't see who pushed him?
You what, sorry?
Did the sergeant not see
The sergeant knew who pushed him.
Okay.
He got away with it. He heard nothing more about it. The course he'd been sent on to complete, he completed peacefully and without any further harassment. And a new instructor was found, and everyone was wondering where this bloke was. He got reported as being absent without leave, all kinds of things. Maybe he's had some kind of breakdown or something, who knows, But the guys, Alan was returned then to his regiment, one of the transport regiments, and nothing further was said. He got his course report back from the new instructor who had been overseeing them. Yeah. And, glowing report, what a nice lad, we recommend him for promotion and things like this. Nothing ever came of it until much, 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 much later, when Alan was in a pub in the Midlands having a pint with his wife. He's no longer in the army, and he sat on this bar stool at a bar with his wife enjoying a drink, and all of a sudden he gets punched in the side of the head. He turns around, and there's now quite an ageing little man with a very fine moustache who obviously recognised him and decided to take recompense. The punch didn't do much damage, and Alan, being a big lad, simply, ushered him out of the pub with the help of the bar staff, and they threw the guy out. The guy was obviously still very upset about it many years later, and decided to try and take his revenge.
Lovely.
Yeah. So there we go. I don't think he'll have hurt him. So
it's good when you can hold on to a little revenge without it bothering you, though. Because if you stew on stuff,
I think this bloke will have stewed on it.
Oh,
little man syndrome. He will have done. There's no worse than a 5 foot ankle biter, is there? who thinks he's man in charge? Yeah.
Nice. I like that.
Right.
So let's call it a do, eh?
All right. Well, you better give him email address.
dirtykimbassar@gmail.com. Send us a story in like Jeff has there.
Yeah, and Alan.
We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Give us a share. It seems to help with listens. You could rate us on Apple Podcasts if you listen through Apple. You can rate the podcast, and apparently it helps with search stuff. So
I don't know.
Things show up higher. And
can you rate us? Do we want people to rate us?
We've got 3 5-star ratings on Apple.
Have we?
We have.
Bloody hell.
So thanks for that, whoever you were.
I think it's funny going back to what you were talking about last podcast, how we'd had like something around 700 listens, and we're right impressed by that, aren't we? And pleased with ourselves. But when you actually think about it, on the scale of things, it's not very many at all, is it?
Right, we're at now 771 as of today. That's on. I'm not sure that counts all platforms, but it's as gauge.
Yeah. All right. Well,
so it's bugger all, really, isn't it?
It's entertaining us. That's the important thing. So, but thank you for listening, and thank you for sending us in your stories.
Yeah, it's about 5 to 10 a day generally. It rattles through. So it's whatever. We're enjoying doing it. So yeah, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Stop listening now. Share it now before you forget, and that'll help us.
Grand.
Bye bye.
See you next time. You'll hear us next time.
You're doing it again, aren't you?
What?
See you here.
I know, it's just habit.